Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar on opportunities in finance and policy to support the adoption of early warning systems in ASAL water systems. My name is Chamia Mutuku and I am the Water Intervention Manager under the Resilient Arid Lands Partnership for Integrated Development Plus, which we refer to as RAPID Plus, a program convened by the Millennium Water Alliance and implemented by our partners, Care International, CRS, Food for the Hungry, and World Vision Kenya, in partnership with the county governments of Garissa, Wajir, Isiolo, Marsabit, and Turkana, with funding from the Swiss Development Corporation. Now, this webinar, organized by the Millennium Water Alliance, builds on insights from previous programs, learning events, and advances in the program's mission by strengthening scaling up of early warning and early action approaches in ASAL water systems. This webinar will explore how to bridge the gap between the global and national financing and policy opportunities and the county level implementation realities, with a focus on strengthening and operationalization of EWS in ASAL water systems. More specifically, the webinar aims to achieve the following: examine the global financing opportunities that can support early warning systems, adoption, and early action, discuss county-level challenges and opportunities in integrating EWS into water system planning and operations, and identify practical pathways for strengthening policy, financing, and institutional arrangements to support early action. Before we get started, I'd want to cover some housekeeping rules. First, the session will be recorded and shared following the event. Live captions and translation are enabled for this event. To view the live captions, click the button there, language and speech, and then click show live captions. Language selection, but if you would like to enable translation to other languages, etc., you may click on the gear icon in the upper right corner of the live captions box. Click language settings and choose another language for interpretation. We welcome all opinions during this session, but please be kind. Be kind and respectful during discussions. Be present and interact during the event. We ask that you utilize the Q&A features if you have specific questions for our presenters or panelists, but we welcome you to share your own experiences, challenges, and lessons learned around early warning systems within ASAL water systems. You may ask questions at any time, and we will answer them during the audience Q&A portion in the second half of the event. Here you can see an agenda for the event. After we finish setting the stage, we will hear from our keynote speaker and the event moderator, Dr. Faith Mitheu, followed by a panel discussion that will explore how financing and policy frameworks can better support the adoption and operationalization of early warning systems in order to enhance the resilience of water systems in ASAL counties. Then we will pivot to an audience Q&A session where we will try to answer your questions. Lastly, we will wrap up with some final messages before closing the webinar. Dr. Mitheu and her colleague, Dr. James Mumina, will be our moderators in this webinar session. The two experts have been leading Millennium Water Alliance efforts at building capacities of 5 county governments, Garissa, Wajir, Turkana, Marsabit, and Isiolo, in exploring practical and innovative applications of EWS systems in ASAL water systems. Dr. Faith Mitheu is a specialist in water resources management, climate resilience, early warning, early action systems, and climate risk analysis in ASAL contexts. Dr. James Mumina is an expert in climate information services, geospatial modeling, Earth observation, and the application of early warning systems for water resilience. As a reminder, please feel free to ask Dr. Mitheu and Dr. Mumina and any other presenter questions in the Q&A box, and we will try to answer them during the audience Q&A portion. Dr. Mitheu, over to you.
Thank you, Chamia, for that introduction, and good morning, good afternoon to the participants. I'll go straight to a background presentation. So I'll do a background presentation on some of the lessons we learned during the learning event that was done as part of this project to just set the stage for our panel discussion. So to just set the context is that ASAL water systems have been facing increasing climate variability and uncertainty. And this is basically because of increase in frequency of drought and floods, as well as other shocks. And most of us might be aware that climate and early warning information is now actually increasingly available, but this has not consistently been translated to support water systems decisions and actions. Now, some core principles, even as we think about making our water systems climate resilient, is that we need to start thinking about anticipation and not reaction. And this basically means acting before the impact escalates, being ready to act before impact escalates. Decision-oriented information is mostly having or using forecast that's reliable and that can clearly be used to link to specific early actions. Having clear triggers is the third one, and this basically means having predefined thresholds for actions. So once you have your forecast, there is need to kind of translate that into decision variables that can now be used to inform when we need to take the early actions. The fourth is on institutional coordination, and basically this is mostly on ensuring that all the relevant actors are on board and that they have their roles assigned so that we reduce the duplication of efforts when doing these activities. And the fifth is sustainable financing. Again, these cannot really happen without finances, so there is need to have pre-targeted resources before crisis, such that once we are ready to act before the impact, we already have finances that are tagged to anticipatory actions or early actions to support the early actions. To just demystify some of those gaps that we found out during our learning event, I'll present it through this flow diagram. And this shows component of an anticipatory action system or an early action system. And the first and second component, basically, it's more about or represent early warning systems data and how you define the triggers or the thresholds that will be used. The third component is about defining or designing the early actions that will be undertaken within that period of window of opportunity. And the fourth is on policy integration and institutions. Again, this ensuring that you have all the institutions on board and they understand what role they play. And the fifth is on financing, which means you need to have the finances to support this activity. Then overall, there is evidence and learning, which is mostly done through post-assessments, where you gather information once an activation has occurred to just learn what worked, what didn't work, and what needs to be improved so that you can now improve the various systems to make this, the AA system more effective. Now, to start off on component 1 and 2 is that we found out that data actually exists and the counties are aware or they know about even the data sources, and some of the data forecasting data that comes from Kenya Meteorological Department or National Drought Management Authority, they're aware of it. But then this data has not been explicitly linked to early actions, and there is that missing link in terms of defining the decision rules or developing thresholds that now will guide on how actions needs to be undertaken. Of course, the capacity also to translate this forecast into these decision rules is also was also limited. On the third, which is early actions, we found out that already the counties are implementing actions, some of them being, for instance, preventive borrower servicing or prepositioning of spare parts. But the timing of these actions is what is lacking, because these actions are actually done at an emergency or a reactive approach. And for us to move away from that, we need then to make sure that these actions are climate informed and they are designed in such a way that you're able to undertake them within that window of opportunity that the forecast information provides. Then on institutions, we found that, of course, there is limited integration of early warning systems data use in the policies. And although the counties have, some counties have policies, water policies, others are still developing or updating their policies, there is that lack of the operational guidance on how to use early warning systems data. For instance, the policy doesn't clearly say who provides the data, who will interpret, who will make the decision, and then also who will authorize the funding. So ideally, the policies that are there are not yet aligned to inform the use of early warning systems data in the ASAL context. Then on financing, actually, this was the biggest bottleneck, and because ideally all the finances that comes to the county are mostly used in a reactive approach, and a chunk of these budgets are actually tagged to infrastructural development like borehole drilling. So what this means is that there is no budget that starts to early supporting the undertaking of early actions. And also early spending lacks explicit authorization. So ideally, even if the county are able to streamline everything and be able to know the need to undertake some actions before a crisis, they still lack that explicit authorization because also of the audit issues that would come if they just spend money that was not directed for that specific activity. Although, despite the various gaps, of course, there are various opportunities that emerged. For instance, there is the growing global climate financing for resilience. And I think this is what one of the points we'll be covering today for counties to just understand what climate financing is out there and how they can tap into this. The second is that we've seen an ongoing strengthening of national frameworks for early action and anticipatory actions. And the first example is the development of the Kenya Roadmap for Anticipatory Actions. It's a very good framework that can guide the counties in how now they can transition from reactive to proactive way of dealing with disasters. And the third is an increase in focus on AA approaches, where we've seen many UN agencies and humanitarian organizations being able to now go to these AA approaches. This means there is a lot of buy-in that is there, and this is something that the counties can also leverage in. Now, innovatively also, we just need to think about, especially now that we are in the AI era, that new data sources will keep coming, so including remote sensing and real-time monitoring of these shocks. So even if you start now using one specific data set, there is need to continue monitoring and continue capacity building so that you can be able to now use data, that the upcoming data through the innovations that ongoing. Then the second is that there is rich indigenous knowledge, and now that because we are talking about ASAL counties, this is very critical that this information can be integrated with scientific information to just ensure that the data or the forecast that we are using as some trust from the communities that will be using these, undertaking these early actions. Just few takeaways before I finalize this is that, of course, we may have the data, but then you need to be able to go through the entire cycle of an AA system for you to just create value. So moving from data to actions is really what we are keen on. And to achieve this, there is need to tackle all the gaps across the various components that we've talked about. But what we found out again is that the biggest bottleneck is on policy and financing, and the counties really need a lot of help in terms of streamlining this. And this is why we thought there is need for this webinar so that we can bring expertise on policy and financing to just discuss some of these issues and help the counties to deal with the realities of implementation of early warning or translating early warning systems data to early actions. I wish to stop there and just call on my colleague, James, to take up the next session. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Faith, for the rich and thoughtful provoking overview. You have done an excellent job in painting the big picture on the climate context, the early warning landscape, and what we have been learning on the ground across the ASAL counties. What we had is both encouraging and sobering. We have better information than ever before, and yet the gap between knowing and acting remains one of the most critical challenges we face. And that is precisely why the conversations we are about to have so deeply are important. So the question is no longer simply technical, it is about finance, about policy, institutions, and the political will to translate these early warning signals into early action for water vulnerable communities. To help us explore these questions, I have the privilege of introducing 4 exceptional voices, each bringing in distinct and vital perspectives. First, we have Rose Mackenzie. Rose Mackenzie is a policy advisor on water sector and food security at the Embassy of the Kingdom of Netherlands. Rose brings a global development finance lens on our discussion and is uniquely positioned to shed light on how international financing mechanism can be better channeled to support ASAL specific needs. Rose, we are glad to have you with us. Next, we have Mr. Isaac Kega. Isaac Kega is the Director General for the Water Sector Trust Fund. Isaac sits at a critical nexus between the national policy, the county level implementation. He understands better than most how Kenya can leverage global financing to build resilience, locally owned water systems. Isaac, thank you for being here. Third, we have Engineer Abdihakim Mohammed, who is the County Director of Water for the County Government of Garissa and the SPIU Coordinator for the Horn of Africa Groundwater Resilience Project. Abdulhakim brings an irrepressible ground-level perspective on what it takes to translate national framework and global ambitions into real working systems in some of the Kenya's most water-stressed counties. We are honored by your presence today. Finally, we have Engineer Robinson Macharia, who is the County Director of Water for Samburu County. Robinson presents the voice of practitioners who are navigating the intersection of climate and predictability, infrastructure constraints, and community needs day in, day out. Thank you, Robinson, for joining us today. With such a distinguished panel, I'm confident we are in a rich and candid conversation. Dr. Faith will be guiding our dialogue around 3 interconnected themes. Theme 1, the financing landscape, how resources can be mobilized and channeled. Theme 2, integration and implementation, turning policy into practice. And Theme 3, sustainability, ensuring these systems outlive the external project support. For each theme, we'll hear perspectives from the global, national, and county levels, because the solutions we need must be coherent across all 3. I will now hand back to Dr. Faith, who will lead us into the conversation within the panel discussions. Dr. Faith, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Mumina, for that introduction to our panel team. and welcome our panel team. I'll go straight to the first theme, which is on financing. And the first question will go to Rose. Rose, from a global development perspective, what financing mechanism can be leveraged to support the adoption of climate and early warning systems data in water systems? Rose, over to you.
Thank you, Faith. Please confirm that you can hear me.
Yes, loud and clear.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to participate in this webinar. I must say that this discussion is extremely timely. It takes place when the value of anticipatory action and early warning systems is higher now than ever before. In these recent times, as we increasingly witness the devastation and intensity of weather hazards and patterns, such as the ones that we've recently seen as the Nairobi floods and the recent devastating droughts that we experienced here in Kenya, and I believe the ASAL areas are still recovering from that. And therefore, I believe it is increasingly urgent that adoption of climate and early warning systems is scaled up and existing financing mechanisms leveraged to support this. From a global development perspective, I could think of a few financing mechanisms that could be leveraged for adoption of anticipatory action and early warning in water systems. And Faith, I must say that we definitely need to, as we talk about the early warning systems, also hand in hand tag in the anticipatory action part of it, which is extremely important and fundamental to the early warning discussions. So back to the financing mechanisms, the few that I could think of and bring to this discussion, there are quite a number actually out there. And we could think of the green or climate financing instruments that are out there. We've got the Global Climate Fund, we've got the Green Fund, we've got the green bonds out there, very deliberately structured to address the threats around climate and reinforcing or climate proofing infrastructure. We have the grant funds. As much as the grant funding landscape is dwindling, it still is there and getting more focused, getting more targeted. So this is still available to be tapped into. We've got concessional financing available from different institutions. From the Netherlands, we have FMO, the Netherlands Development Bank. We have Invest International, also a Dutch development financing instrument. We've got the World Bank, who's always been there, issuing concession loans. We have IFAD, we have KfW, the German Development Bank. We have the European Investment Bank. We have quite a number of multilateral development financing institutions that offer Kenya concessional financing as well as also grant, I must say. We also have private equity that will also be tapped into, and this will also include our everyday commercial banks that offer loans, and increasingly these banks are receiving quite a bit of capacity to develop products, financing products for the water sector. We also have impact investor funds, and these are quite a number. These are funds and foundations that are out there that are keen on generating impact around social and environmental impacts. And these are the usual ones that we know: Gate Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation. We have Triodas, we have Root Capital. We have quite a number out there. I think what could be interesting for this discussion would be the blended financing option. I think if I look at all the other options that I have looked into and shared, blended financing could be quite an interesting one, where it offers the ability to blend some of these financing options that I talked about. For example, if Kenya receives concessional financing from the World Bank, for example, that can be used to leverage, private sector financing, and in that way, blended also bring in some grants as well. So blended financing, I would say, highly relevant for what we are talking about today. PPP arrangements close to blended financing. We've all heard about PPP. I think it's the trending financing mechanism in the neighborhood where public funds, are blended with private investor funds, and this go towards, addressing infrastructure development. I think what I would like to say as I wind up is that what is key here is that increasingly there's need that this climate and early warning systems, the anticipatory systems, these are embedded into the design of water systems from the outset. In this way, it is an integral part of the financing for the water system. And in that way, you're able to move ahead in developing the system and managing it sustainably with the early warning part and anticipatory part already embedded right from the beginning, right from the design stage, rather than what I believe has been happening, where financing for water systems is done separately, and as almost an afterthought, we are now looking for financing separately for early warning. An integral embedded approach would be recommended.
Thank you, Rose, for that. Thank you for that elaborate answer on some of the financing mechanisms. I'll now go to Isaac to talk about how Kenya is leveraging that. And the question to Isaac is, how is Kenya leveraging these global financing opportunities to support climate and early warning systems data adoption in the water systems? Welcome, Isaac.
Thank you very much, Dr. Miteu. Indeed, as you did indicate in your opening remarks, the country, like many other sub-Saharan countries, continue to bear the brunt of cyclic ravages of floods, drought, and famine. And in a bid to secure sustainable responses within the country, there has been a shift in terms of the drought response strategies to shift the narrative away from crisis response to executed synchronized policy frameworks as well as the response strategies. And as a country, of course, we appreciate that the overall economic development blueprint is the Vision 2030. And for the water sector, this has been customized into deliverables that are outlined and detailed within the National Water Master Plan, the National Water Master Plan 2030. So within this National Water Master Plan, we have detailed investment prospectuses that we think present a formidable opportunity for investors within the country and also out of the country to invest in a bid to address the opportunities presented by the water sector and also directly aligned to Agenda 2030 as well as the Sustainable Development Goals number 6 and 13. Just a background is that the Water Sector Trust Fund is established as a state corporation within the country and under the Water Act of 2016 with the mandate of providing conditional and conditional grants to the counties. And the main focus is on enhancing access to water and sanitation services. So in line with this mandate, we are responsible for leveraging global finance. And I think this is the first issue that I would want to have a discussion around. So the question is then, how are we bridging the financing gap? We are all aware, for those who are participating within the Kenyan water sector, that the country is currently implementing the National Water and Sanitation Investment and Financing Plan. And the expectation is that we intend to raise funds from 3 key sources. There is the Government of Kenya financing, there's a financing from the development partners, and most importantly, financing from the private sector through the PPPs and other innovative financing mechanisms. Unfortunately, and I think it is important for us to appreciate that public funds alone are not sufficient to meet the funding gaps of around $1 trillion shillings, which is required for us to achieve these investments. And for that reason, as a fund, we have been able to translate these requirements into 3 specific strategies that are detailed in our resource mobilization plan. The first strategy that we are currently implementing is what we consider to be the programmatic approach to fundraising. And in the past, the focus was majorly on specific projects, but we are now convinced that addressing water security and water insecurity issues require not just local strategies, but also regional strategies. And for that reason, we are currently under the support of the World Bank, financing and supporting the Horn of Africa Groundwater and Resilience project. And this is a direct, this is a project that is directly targeted at addressing the opportunities presented by the National Water Master Plan. So we intend under the Horn of Africa Groundwater and Resilience project to enhance the levels of service provision and also investments in technologies that will address issues around the early warning systems and also response against the opportunities presented by climate change. The other thing that the WSTF is doing is issues around the blended financing and de-risking. If you look at NASIP, it clearly presents the opportunity for public-private partnerships, and the fund is currently seeking for financing from the Danish impact funds and also the global climate funds like the GCF. And the intention here is to establish a first loss capital to de-risk and provide some level of guarantee to investments within the water service providers as well as communities that are involved in service provision. This strategy basically seeks to operationalize the provisions that we have in the Water Act and providing a safe harbor to attract private capital to invest not just in the hardware components and infrastructure, but also attract the private sector to invest in climate technology, as well as the early warning systems, infrastructure without, one, the fear of non-return on investments, and two, the fear of policy reversals. So this is cast within the Act, and the investors are assured of returns. The other key issue that strategy that the fund is implementing is we have invested in what we consider to be the fiduciary and the statutory readiness for the private sector. So ALO, the National Water Policy 2021, provides a very robust legal framework that will allow the country and the sector to absorb a global climate finance into. We know the sector currently is very well regulated. We have a very accountable ecosystem for investments, and we give assurance to the investors, both public and private, that all the investments made are able to be tracked and reported against the National Climate Change action plan.
Thank you, Isaac, for that elaborate answer. I'm sorry, we have to move on to the next because of time. And I'll go to the county perspective to Engineer Abdiakim. And the question is, what type of financing mechanisms would make it easier for counties to invest in early warning and early action for water systems to protect the water systems? Abdiakim.
Yes, thank you. I hope you can hear me, Faith.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you so much. I think as for Garissa, from maybe practical experience that we have at the moment, we have the primary barriers are twofold, that we have the financing mechanism that for us to use the early warning system, which is fragmented. We have fragmented funding mandates and also a rigid fiscal cycle. So this means that currently the early warning systems and special actions financing is held majorly by our WASH partners, and making it difficult for county governments to integrate these funds into maybe a long-term infrastructure planning. So so our internal budgeting, if you look at the moment, internal budgeting processes often prioritize reactive repair over proactive mitigations, because the early actions does not always align with the traditional public financing management that we have for purpose of reporting. So to address this, and we advocate for blending financing mechanism and also contingency funds embedded directly within the county budgets, such as an example, like we have the county climate change funds, transitioning towards performance-based financing, Also, we are learning. We have an experience with the K-Wash program, where you find we have verification protocols will also be beneficial. This will ensure that the disbursements are tied to, let's say, verified functionality of climate resilient systems, rewarding proactive maintenance and disaster preparedness, rather than just new construction. So majorly, as I can say, is a blend. We need to do some blending financing mechanisms and also contingency funds, because since we have two major, fragmented financing mandates and rigid fiscal cycles, which means the budget cycle for our WASH partners and the budget cycle for the government is totally different. So sometimes when you want to do when you want to complement efforts, it becomes harder. So if we go towards the way of the establishing a fund like the county climate change funds or contingency fund, where now you can bring resources together and try to be proactive instead of reactive. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Abdiakim, for that elaborate answer on some of the financing mechanisms that the county is looking or it's already trying to implement so that they can move from reactive to the proactive way of dealing with disasters, especially drought and floods. Now, we will transition to the second theme, which is on integration and implementation. And the first question will go to, and ideally, the why we have this theme is because financing alone is not important. It's not enough, I mean. And although we have early warning systems that will deliver value, we need also these to be integrated into planning and the operational way of the counties or the way they do their things. So the first question will go to Rose, and it reads, globally, what institutional or policy approaches have proven most effective when integrating early warning systems into sectoral systems? Over to you, Rose.
Thank you, Dr. That's an interesting question. I believe we can all agree that the operation and implementation of early warning systems is a multi-sectoral, multi-actor partnership affair. And therefore, this calls for coordination and breaking of silo mentality between departments, sectors, and even within a landscape. I think that's how I'd like to start us off responding or reflecting to this question. And just thinking about what institutional or policy approaches have proven more effective in integrating early warning systems into sectoral systems. First and foremost, I could think of embedding anticipatory action and early warning roadmaps into institutional architecture and in sector policy frameworks. The anticipation action and the early warning roadmap should not be an afterthought or should not be standalone, brought along as and when and at any stage. The whole idea is that these are embedded right from the outset when institutions are being set up and when policies are being developed. The other approach that I have seen, working effectively is what I call the hub approach. And the hub approach, this is where multi-actor hubs are set up. So at the beginning, I said, this is a multi-sectoral, multi-actor, affair. So the hubs will allow or will be that platform that brings all these relevant actors together and with an ambition to enhance coordination, especially when it comes to data sharing, which is key when you talk about early warning, and ensuring resource efficiency. This, at the end of the day, also has to be embedded in policy for it to take effect and be enforced going forward. So those are two main approaches that I want to share with us for further reflection. The embedding into institutions and policies right from the beginning of anticipatory action and early warning roadmaps, and also the creation of hubs as an approach that ensures integration after action is facilitated. Thank you, Faith. Back to
Thank you. Thank you, Rose. Thank you for shedding light on some of the approaches that would work to ensure that we can institutionalize anticipatory actions. The second question goes to Isaac to shed light on the national perspective. How is Kenya integrating climate and early warning information into national water and drought management frameworks? Over to you, Isaac.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Mitheu. I think to respond to the question around the integration, I would want to focus on what I consider to be the two key issues. And the first key issue is the strategic policy frameworks and how this has been crafted at the national level. And number two will be the institutional coordination and operations and how this coordinated at both the national and the county levels, as well as the intergovernmental coordination. And finally, of course, there will be discussions around the financing frameworks that we have. So when you think about the strategic policy framework, we might be aware that the country has provided for and has formulated the national framework for climate services. This was formulated last year in 2025. And this primary policy is what considered the backbone that is designed to ensure that climate information is co-produced and shared across the entire value chain from the data providers like the Kenya Meta, as well as the water company. We also have the anticipatory action roadmap that runs from 2024 up to 2029. We are now in the fourth year of implementation. And this is a strategy, is a roadmap that basically provides the guidelines for multi-hazard early warning systems. The third one is what we call the early warnings for all, or popularly known as EW4 all. And this was launched last year in May, and aims for universal early warning coverage by 2027 through the pillars that have been identified within the strategy. So coming to the second point around the institutional coordination and operations, we are aware that the National Drought Management Authority operates the drought early warning system, and popularly known as DEWS. And this is the principal document that publishes the monthly bulletins on, the status of climate and weather, and also the early warning systems. And it uses satellite data as well as ground data to categorize the drought status. And the drought calls and the emergency calls made by the NDMA are made based on these publications. And finally, of course, it's the Water Resource Authority, because they manage the real-time monitoring through telemetric stations and also digital water permitting, and thus are able to advise the country on the current status and the current status and the need to react to certain environmental issues. Finally, of course, on financial integration, because a critical arm, we know that the country has established what we consider the National Drought Contingency Fund. And this is purely a dedicated mechanism that provides funds to counties to specifically against their pre-approved contingency plans, ensuring that when an EWS alert is issued, the financing is available for action. And finally, we have the climate change, the county climate change funds, what the triple CFs, that basically devolve the finance mechanisms that allow local communities and counties to prioritize and finance resilience projects based on the local climate risks. Happy to submit.
Thank you, Isaac, for that elaborate answer. And I'm hoping there is support that trickles down to counties so that they can also be able to operationalize these and do the integration. Now, the other question, to just listen to a county perspective, is going to Robinson Macharia. And the question is on, at the county level, what institutional arrangements are needed to ensure that early warning information is used in water systems planning and operations? Robinson?
Thank you very much, moderator. This is Robinson Macharia. In the county government, like all what we know, has a lot of, I think you have talked of the barriers, you have talked of the challenges, but to ensure those challenges that are in place, there are various ways and systems that needs to be put in place that ensures that the county streamline and are able to make progress in terms of achieving the early warning and taking measures. One of the greatest things is to establish a strong link between early warning and budgets, because you find that in the county, most of the counties do not budget for this. So the systems is to ensure a strong link between the two, and also to in that pre-agreed triggers need to be put in place and automatic or rapid fund released. Once there's those agreed triggers, then really funds are released just to undertake the measures. Another critical thing that requires needs to be praised is the capacity support, not just funding. Most of the times you find financiers or donors usually come to fund, but what is required, the systems that are required, is to do capacity building to all key players, all key sectors that are engaged when certain phenomena appears. For instance, we have project preparation facilities, financial management training. We need the community and all the stakeholders that are in water sector needs to be trained on financial management, issues of technical support for climate finance needs to be enhanced in the county. So the issue of capacity building plays a critical role. Then the third one, the systems that needs to be put in place in the county level is the integrated planning. We align water, climate, and disaster risk financing. We align them. So we have a holistic and integrated plan. Also more than project-based to system-based. We need to move from project-based to system-based financing. So I think all these ones, these are measures that needs to be put in place in the counties. Thank you, moderator. Over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Robinson, for shedding light on some of the things that the county can leverage on or are already doing to ensure that they can integrate the use of climate and early warning information in supporting the resilience of water systems, especially in planning and operations. Now, we will move to the third theme, which is on sustainability, and which Robinson has really touched on a little bit. And this is because ideally what we've seen is that most early warning initiatives begin with an external support. So you have funding that's coming through a project, but then the long-term resilience of these initiative depends on whether these systems becomes embedded within local planning, budgeting, and operational processes across all levels. So in this theme, we want to look at how sustainability, or how can we ensure once we start implementing or adopting the use of early warning data to early action, we can be able to work on sustainability. Now, the first question goes to Rose, again, to just paint a picture on the global perspective. From a global development perspective, what financing models have proven effective in sustaining early warning systems beyond project cycles? Over to you, Rose.
Thank you, Faith, for that question. I believe it's important to note that projects implementing early warning system need to do that based on a demand-driven approach. And I believe Robinson has touched on that. And I'm aware that systems have been developed in the past that remain dormant to date, not due to lack of a financing model, but really because there was no real demand. It was project-driven. And again, Robinson has urged us to move into a system approach, which is what we're discussing today. So the thinking to that is that as much as we're talking about a system, a project would need to assess and see if there's little or no interest for early warning systems, or the value of such a system is not yet fully appreciated. And perhaps the best place to start would be sensitization, capacity building, before investing in building up a system. Now, that having been said, depending on the ownership or anchorage of the early warning system, different financing models could apply. If the early warning system project is embedded in a public institution, then the financing model would be one that is also linked to the public budgetary structures that ensure that sustainable, funds are flowing into the public coffers, but not limited only to the public fund. At the same time, also, tap into other available. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
There was a disruption. Sorry for that. Yes, so I was just basically saying that if an early warning system is embedded in a public institution, then advisably the financial model will be hinged on the budgetary process, which ensures that sustainable funding coming in from the public coffers, but not necessarily limited to the public funds only. That financial model will also allow for other funding streams to come in from other sources that I had initially talked about. In often cases, the endeavor is to have government ownership for this early warning system, as early warning is generally seen as a public service for the public good. That aside, we have seen, early warning systems also, being anchored in regional bodies such as ICPAC, and I believe the financial model there is structured around membership fee, the member states contribution that part of that could be allocated to the early warning work that ICPAC does. I would believe that the early warning systems that are community-based, the financial model will be around private equity options. There's also the aspect of G2G, government-to-government arrangements, especially when we talk about data and satellite data. No, we don't need every country having their own satellites up in the galaxy. So government-to-government arrangements could allow for that resource efficiency in data sharing. Ultimately, the sustainability of the financing model will much depend on the project having demonstrated the value of such a system. Generating ownership from different stakeholders will be interested in sustaining the system for their own benefit. It will therefore be prudent that the project, while it's still going on, already works out a financial model earlier on and even tests it before closing out to see how it would operate post the project phase.
Thank you, Rose. Thank you, Rose, for starting us off on that sustainability and shedding light on on how we can make sure that even if projects are implemented, you can still bring sustainability to them by embedding them into the public institution. So I'll go to the national perspective to Isaac, and the question is on how is Kenya working to embed early warning systems within national planning and budget frameworks to ensure sustainability. Over to you, Isaac.
Yeah, thank you very much, Faith. In response to the question, the first point I would want to appreciate is that both levels of government have a constitutional and fiduciary responsibility in line with the disaster response, and they also have a mutual responsibility in planning. So, as I did mention in my previous remarks, the critical bottleneck, and this has been alluded to by my colleague from Garissa, has been financing. And to address the challenges around financing, both levels of government have developed very, very specific targets and developed very specific packages to ensure that there is a sustained flows to both the national government and the county governments to address issues around disaster risk management, as well as responses to issues raised under the early warning systems. Now, specifically for the country, Kenya has officially pledged to allocate around 5% of our total budget to national disaster risk management, especially, and we have very, very specific budget lines allocated to early warning systems. In addition to this, and in line with the budget guidelines that have been issued by the National Treasury in the last financial year, the counties are also required to make specific provisions for early warning systems. In addition to this, and in line with the national determined contributions, we have very, very specific targets that have been allocated to both the national governments and the county governments that are anticipated to address issues around the early warning systems. In addition to this, and in line again with the budgeting frameworks, within the medium-term expenditure framework for the national governments, the early warning systems priorities are vertically integrated into the medium-term expenditure budget making processes from all levels of governments, just to ensure that climate responses are part of the core functions of each of these two levels of governments. In addition to this, of course, I talked about the National Framework for Climate Services, which was launched last year. And this framework basically serves as a primary governance mechanism for integrating climate services into planning and policy across the all climate sensitive sectors. Finally, of course, the final strategy is that there is the need to bring all the stakeholders together in terms of disaster response. And for this reason, the government has established both the situation rooms that are multi-stakeholder in nature, and they have also been devolved to the high-risk counties, for example, Kilifi and Homa Bay. And these basically provide for provision of real-time data to facilitate efficient decision-making. In addition to this, and to enhance the levels of coordination, we now have a standard operating procedures that have been shared with the relevant key stakeholders to ensure that disaster response is not reactionary, but proactive, and we are always ready for this. So yes, thank you very much for that. And of course, the final comment I would want to make is on funding mechanisms. We both have the National Drought Emergency Fund and also the climate change funds available to support early warning systems within the counties. Thank you, Dr.
Thank you, Isaac, for your elaborate answer. I'll go to the county, and the question goes to Engineer Abdiakim. So from the county perspective, how can early warning systems be institutionalized within county budgets and development plans to ensure they continue beyond external project support? Over to you, Abdiakim.
Yes, thank you, Faith. I think when you talk of institutionalization starts with the county CIDP, which is the County Integrated Development Plan, and the County Water Sanitation Strategy and Investment Plan. By embedding early warning system as a core strategic objective in this statutory documents, we ensure that they are assigned a budget line during the annual development plans processes, shifting them from project-based to service-based priorities. That's one. To continue now to justify or to continue justifying the investments, we must communicate the impacts through resilient metrics. We move the conversation away from the maybe, let's say, just liters of water delivered to losses averted. So by demonstrating that a small investment in early warning system prevented the collapse of a multi-million shillings dollar water pumping system during flooding, or reduced the need for expensive, emergency water tracking during dry spell. So that will provide a clear economic rationale for the county assembly, because they're the one who approve the budgets. They're the one who approve the budgets for the counties to sustain, so that the departments can sustain funding. So, and we use our county's communication strategy, such as community radios or WhatsApp networks, because nowadays WhatsApp has become, more vibrant communication tool, media, so that you can gather grassroots feedback on how these warnings have saved livestock, protected livelihoods, protected the local water kiosks, protected the pipelines, protected maybe the pump houses along the riverines. So this will create now a feedback loop that at least validates the investments to both the policymakers and also the public. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Abdiakim, and thank you to everyone. We come to an end of our panel discussion, and from this we've gathered that there is a lot that the counties can borrow from the various financing mechanisms, including the blended approach to finances, as well as the coordination. I think one of the key things is that there is need to improve on coordination from the national level to the county level, because it looks like there is money already at the national level that's meant for disaster risk management that needs to trickle down to the counties. So a lot of coordination is required. Of course, the counties will need a lot of support, capacity building, because transitioning from reactive to proactive, it's not a simple thing. So capacity building is also another key thing that have come out. So I'll stop there, and I will welcome my colleague James to take us through the question and answer session, where we'll now be directing questions to our panelists, questions that came from our participants. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Faith. I think we have quite an interesting engagement, judging by the Q&A session. And we have a few questions that are quite interesting, and I'll try as much as possible to direct them to the specific people who are required to respond to them. And the first question, I think I would say, goes to Mr. Kega. And the question is, what governance requirements, that is procurement, audit trails, and approval, are needed to build into the early action financing so that it's compliant? That's a question from one of the participants. So please just make it short and concise.
Yeah, thank you very much, James. Indeed, governance continues to be and presents a formidable challenge, not just to early warning systems, but also to the general service provision within the country. As Abdihakim alluded earlier on, most of the counties struggle with an enabling policy and legal framework, and this also is a formidable challenge at the national levels. So in answer to a question, the first and the most important thing would be for an enhanced levels of coordination in both the legal and governance frameworks between the national government and also the county governments. And within the national government itself, the intention should be that the legislative framework and enabling governance framework within the counties should be facilitative enough to respond to the early warning systems as an integral part of planning and the service delivery within the county.
Thank you, Mr. Kega. And I think Engineer Abdelhakim, this is also quite an interesting question for you. Having been positioned in that position whereby you leave this, and the voices in terms of compliance and implementation level, that's what day-to-day things that you deal with. So knowing exactly which approval steps cause delays, whether it's from the county executive or from the procurement, I think you can have a little bit to add to what Mr. Kega has given in terms of the response to the question, so that you can give justice to the question.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. James. It's true that Mr. Kega has said that, without legal frameworks, you cannot implement anything. But for early warning systems require rapid response. In the event you don't have prepositioned, maybe let's say prepositioned fast moving spare parts. And for rapid response with the government bureaucracy in terms of procurement and all this, it will not allow you to respond rapidly. So as he has alluded correctly, we need to embed in our legal frameworks a system where you need to have preposition this. We need to use the data that is provided by the early warning systems. We need to learn from the previous cycles of events that happened and then predict. And then using that, you can now preposition. And how do you preposition? You preposition using you preposition using now you preposition using the lessons that you have learned from them. You preposition, what do you preposition? You preposition the whatever that is required, like the spare parts and those things, so that at least you can now say the early warning systems have guided you, and then you have also not evaded the procurement process, but it is through the early warning data that you have analyzed that has given you now the chance to act proactively than instead of acting reacting to when the situation happens. Thank you.
Thank you, Engineer Abdul Hakim. I'm sorry, I still need to put you to on the spot again with another question from one of our participants, who says that he has observed in other East African countries that there's a disconnect between the integration of indigenous knowledge and the early warning formal system. So how can Kenya address this problem, and what has worked from your experience of being on the ground?
Yes. In fact, as we speak today, as we speak this week, from Monday yesterday, we have a team of directors from the county government who are doing special action plans for the county, spearheaded by the Department of the Special Program. If you look where they're doing that, where they're doing the special action plan is in one of our rural setup, a place called Masalani. So if you look at it, because you find that when we are trying to do this and special action plans, we try to make sure that at least we translate it to the local language, the kind of the questions that we're asking ourselves as professionals, and then you find it will be easier for the local community to understand exactly what are we asking, so that they can now at least give you a feedback, contribute to the responses that you have, and see how you can capture. Because some of us, you might even find us being professional, but we also had us. So we understand some of these phenomena that happen, on how also our indigenous people are predicting, how they are trying to understand the weather patterns and those things, and the season changes. So I think it's just that it's not properly documented as an indigenous knowledge, but it is blended in these plans or responses that we trying to develop as a county. Thank you.
Thank you, Engineer. And probably maybe Faith, from the learnings and the evidence, the findings from the study, maybe you could make a comment on the same question as well.
Sorry, James, I lost you there.
Okay, sorry. We had a question from one of our participants regarding the disconnect between the ITK and the formal systems. And the participants wanted to understand how the problem is being addressed and what has worked from the findings.
Yeah. So ideally, we have a lot of projects that are ongoing that are supporting the traditional, the integration of traditional knowledge. And actually, one of the projects is a project that's being led by James. It's called FOLA, so it's focused to early action, where they are now sitting down with the communities to actually interpret the forecast and use that to define or design anticipatory actions. And it's something that has been ongoing for a while now in the ASAL counties, and we hope that the learnings from these will really help in ensuring that we can now formally use the traditional knowledge on top of the scientific knowledge to inform the early actions. But more so, the co-production itself is very key, where you bring the local stakeholders from the word go, for them to understand what focus says and how do you compare with the traditional knowledge, and then how do you design the early actions that are feasible to them, that are feasible actually, and that will address the challenges that we face when a drought occurs. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Faith, for that comment. I think we'll switch on the gears and move on. And the next question is quite it's quite a tricky one, and I beg to break it into two so that I can give Rose and Isaac an opportunity to be able to respond to this next question. And the question is that how often, we often see funding cliff after pilot project end. How can development partners work with the private sector players to transition early warning system from donor-funded initiatives to commercially viable services for water utilities? And do these countries or these counties have policy frameworks in place to take care of this policy? So this question, as I mentioned, has two distinct parts, and I want to make sure we honor both. So let me start with Rose and Kega on the development partner, on the development partners and the private sector transition. And then I'll come specifically to the county engineers on what county policy frameworks currently exist or need to exist to make that transition possible. Over to you, Rose and Kega. Any one of you can respond to that first part.
I can go first, no problem. James, it's okay, I can go first.
Yeah, you go on.
Yeah, thank you very much, James. Indeed, most of the financing for early warning systems struggle with one, sustainability in financing, and two, what to consider to be the funding cliff. And one of the reasons why early warning systems struggle with financing is what considered to be the visibility challenge. Like intelligence systems, a perfectly working intelligence system is actually not felt because we don't realize disasters, and the same works for early warning systems. So if a perfectly working early warning systems, then it basically means that we do not experience these disasters, and when they happen, the response is swift, and thus the public and the investment partner to actually feel the impact of what would have happened had you not invested in this. So for us to address the challenges around the funding cliff, we need to integrate and consider this beyond being a public good to a critical operational asset, especially for the water service providers. And from our perspective, the WSTF perspective, the transition to commercial viability basically involves three key strategies and reliance on the evolving policy landscape. The first one is the transitioning to commercial viability and increasing investments by the private sector. And the other issue is that we would want to, especially the financing partners involved in, both disaster response and early warning systems, to purely focus on data as a service and integrate issues around the risk reduction and risk reduction and risk mitigation. And we see a lot of opportunity available for this, not just from the commercial perspective, but also from private insurers using this data for insurance management systems, and also technology firms who can use the results from early warning systems to develop index-based insurance systems. In addition to this, and the Water Fund is on the forefront in the development of a performance-based contracting system. And we see an opportunity where our financing partners, especially development partners, can provide some levels of guarantee funds as well as a viability gap funding to provide some level of security to private to incentivize the private sector in these investments. The final opportunity that we see is the issues around the smart metering integration, and we see this as a huge potential. The levels of metering and the levels of non-revenue in this country, and especially in the counties that are considered to be very high risk, they struggle a lot with the issues around non-revenue water. So we think that the prepaid smart meters can integrate early warning system sensors into the existing infrastructure to create basically a multi-purpose or multi-use digital networks that will generate revenue, not just from water sales, but also from the sale of data and also the provision of early warning data to the utility and the relevant policy and decision makers. Happy to submit.
Thank you, Mr. Kega. Engineers, I think you can better give us a holistic overview of what county policy frameworks that exist or need to exist to be able to make this transition possible. Engineer Abdulhakim or Robinson, one of you can respond to that.
Yeah. Yes, thank you so much. The legal frameworks first for the counties. First, we should start with the strategic plan, and then you go to the policy. Then you go to maybe the water acts, the acts that we require, and then regulations to operationalize now the act. So if you capture all your, or let's say the early warning system into your strategic as one of the specific objectives to be addressed in the strategic document, then you can have the policy direction to go for that. Then you can have the act to do that, and then also regulations to at least operationalize now that act, because that is a full circle as a legal framework for a county, maybe government, to have it so that they can now implement any water, we can now give out access to water to the population. Thank you so much. Robinson maybe can come on.
Robinson, in a minute, if you have something.
Yes, thank you, colleague. What I would like to say to add on what my fellow engineer has said, in the counties, we need to create a dedicated and protected budget line. And as much as you find so many counties, they may be having legal entities, legal frameworks, but actualizing and the goodwill from the executive is another issue. But if we create a dedicated and protected budget line, that will ensure that we have that budget code for early warning funding. That one will play a critical role, because definitely each and every budget year, there will be a component of early warning systems that comprises early warning and also early action. In that chainage, then we shall be ensuring that we have finances in case there is any need at a particular time. So we need to have a dedicated budget line within our budgets in the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Robinson. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to be bringing this quite exciting discussion to a close, but I want to thank everyone of you, the panelists, the participants alike, for your generosity with the questions, your insights, and your time. So let me try to pull together some of the golden threads from our conversations today. We began with fundamental tension that Dr. Faith has so clearly articulated regarding the climate information, and also the gap that exists, or the gaps that persist. So today's discussion has helped us understand why, and more importantly, what it takes to close the gap. Rose reminded us that the global financing mechanism exists for development finance institutions to climate funds, but that the architecture must be deliberately redesigned to reach the subnational actors. The intent is there, the pathway is what we need. Mr. Kega showed us how the national institutions like the Water Sector Trust Fund can serve some of these critical bridges, aggregating, translating, and also routine resources and policy guidance downwards to counties, while carrying local evidence and need of upwards to inform the national strategy. Our engineers, that is Abdulhakim and Robinson, we heard the voice of counties who are not waiting, who are actively seeking to embed early warning into the planning process, their budgets and their institutional DNA, even as they navigate very real constraints in capacity, connectivity, and resources. The thoughts or the thorough line that across all the themes, that is financing, integration, and sustainability, is alignment. Not just technical alignment of data systems, but alignment of priorities, of incentives, of trust, knowledge, levels in governments, and between development partners and the community that we serve. Early warning systems are only for strong as decisions they trigger. A rainfall forecast that sits in a database is not early warning system. It is just data. The system only comes alive when the information reaches the right person at the right time with the institutional backing to act. That is what community of practice and work that Millennium Water Alliance and its partners are doing across the different counties, the 5 different counties, that is Garissa, Wajir, Turkana, Marsabit, and Isiolo. And it's fundamentally about building conditions for actions. A warm and heartfelt thank you for our panelists, Rose, Mr. Kega, Abdul Hakim, and Robinson, for your depth of knowledge and your commitment to this work. You have made this conversation richer for everyone in the room. Thank you to Dr. Mideu, not only for leading today's discussion with such expertise and grace, but for the scholarship and dedication she brings to the sector. And also thank you to the Millennium Water Alliance team for convening this important dialogue, and to all of you, our participants, for bringing your curiosity and your expertise. The communities living in Kenya, arid and semi-arid lands have demonstrated generation after generation of extraordinary resilience. They have survived and they have adapted. What they deserve now is not just resilience, but readiness. The readiness that comes from systems that won early, institutions that act swiftly, and financing that flows predictably. That is the future we are all working towards. Our conversations like this one are now what we get. Thank you all. We wish you a present time and wherever you're joining us from, and look forward to the continued collaborations. This concludes today's webinar. Asante sana. Thank you.
So we will be sharing some resources. The first one being the session recordings for anyone who would want to recap. Also, we have a guidebook that we've been developing, a guidebook on co-designing anticipatory and climate-informed water actions that just sheds light on the specific aspect that the counties need to put together so that they can be able to walk this journey. And then we'll have a learning brief that will be shared within the Millennium Water Alliance social media, so be on the lookout for the same. We'll also share our contacts for the panelists as well as the moderators, so that if you have anything that you would want to ask, you can reach out to us. Thank you so much, and thank you for attending the webinar.
Thank you.